Hey everybody, I'm back. It's good to see you and it's good to be here. Early morning this week from returning from California and the Southern California Annual Linux Expo. Birds are chirping, just watered the garden. It's a great start to the day. I have a few notes, but largely I just want to talk about my experience going to California, what it's like to plan a solo business trip running your own company, which was new to me, seeing old friends, reconnecting with them, spending time, went and visited Rubrik in their headquarters down in Palo Alto. And then I want to talk about some of the things that I left after being at SCaLE. I feel like this trip has been sort of like a vision quest in some ways, sort of an experience that has moved me. I feel like there's the me that was before this trip, and then there's the me now, and they are different people. And it actually took a full week of kind of coming back to reset. But anyways, let me get into it. First, planning my first business trip as a solo entrepreneur. How is that unique and different? What was that like? Well, first off, it's self-funded. I'm used to having work pay for the flight and the hotel and all those things. I've had to book those things many times, but I've never had to think about them from the person paying. And it's not like I'm a jerk. I don't book fancy hotels and first-class flights, but I was certainly in row like 32 in the back of the plane. I was not about to pay the airline, I think, $100 for priority boarding and the ability to choose a seat towards the front of the plane. That seemed crazy per flight. So I wanted to keep the flights very cheap. And I think the karma there was worth it. I had an experience where on one of my flights, I was going to the back and there was this little girl with the cool headphones with the cat ears. Very cool. They were pink. And her mother. And I don't think they spoke a lot of English, but it was obvious the girl was really excited to sit in the window seat. And that was my seat. So of course I gave the little girl the window seat. I don't actually care. I was fine with the aisle. I don't like being interrupted on a flight. I want to kind of fall asleep or be in my own personal space. And I don't want people having to go past me to use the bathroom or whatnot. So that was nice. I would not have probably experienced that if I had been sitting elsewhere in the plane. And flying on a plane is still horribly uncomfortable no matter where you sit, so whatever. So that was interesting. The other thing was I found a kind of a Japanese-style capsule hotel in Redwood City where I was staying in California for the first half of my trip. And I didn't know something like that existed. It was the Casa brand of hotels. I loved it because you just get a text message with the code to the front door and a code to your room. There's no check-in. There's nobody really working at the front desk anyways. There's obviously cleaning staff. But yeah, that was nice. And the room is just a room. It's a small room with a bed and a bath and shower. Done. Relatively cheap. So yeah, I booked extremely cheap, tried to keep all the costs low. And I owned the schedule, which was fun. My schedule was, I left on a Sunday. I spent 4 days in the Bay Area, Silicon Valley, whatever you want to call that, around Palo Alto and Redwood City and up in San Francisco. And that was really just to reconnect with friends, see some folks that I had not seen since my last trip there. I used to go to the Bay Area, typically San Jose or San Francisco airports every month, pretty much 1 week a month, roughly, at least once a quarter, bare minimum, because that was where my work was. I worked out of Palo Alto, but I lived here in Austin, Texas. And I hadn't been back since 2019. So that was wild. San Francisco has changed a lot. It feels very kind of empty when you're down there instead of the usual busyness. And I went on a nice hike. I went down the Coast Trail. I went to Kirby Cove. I had fun with my friend Kenny. It was nice to get out there because there's really nowhere I've lived. I used to live in Oakland a long time ago. There's nowhere I've lived that had better like hikes and trails and outdoor, because in the Bay Area you have mountains and woodlands and forests and lowlands and prairies and ocean and beaches and kind of everything except for a desert is a little bit further away, but you have everything. And it's all within 2 hours tops car ride. So it's a beautiful place to live. And if you have the chance to be there, I recommend being out in nature. The other thing that I wanted to do was go see my friends, especially those at Rubrik. I hadn't seen many of them in close to 5 years since the pandemic really hit, because I left that job at the end of 2020. I survived a good chunk of the year, but then by December, I decided that I needed a change, and that's when I left and then later found SCaLE to do management consulting. So that was fun. The company is now public. It has thousands of people working there, a lot of changes that I had not experienced, but I enjoyed it. I was there for a day and a half, seeing awesome folks. Big shout out to Julia Lee. You're my favorite person. She actually was a lot of the hands behind the scenes helping me get meetings and get in and out and all that kind of jazz, in addition to John Koo. But Julia is really one of the few people in life that I fear. She's a boss. So love you, Julia. Thank you so much for making that trip so memorable and spending time with me. And a lot of it was just catching up with folks. What are you doing? For folks that had come back to Rubrik, what brought you back? What keeps you up at night? What gets you excited? It was great hearing that from folks. And I think it's because a lot of these people have been in my life now for 10 years, 11 years in some cases. That's a long time to know somebody, considering I'm 43. So that's almost half of my professional career I've known these folks at Rubrik. John and Julia and Bipple are my early crew, the folks at Rubrik that kind of spent the most time with in the early days. And coming back after so many years, it was just like picking up in a conversation right where it got left off. They made me feel very welcome and invited and part of what they were doing. It was great. And that's why they're still in my life. That's why these people mean so much to me, is because they are just great people. They are very kind. They are friends. They are people that I probably annoy more than I should by texting them at random times of the day with different ideas and pictures and memes and things. But that's what it means to be my friend. I text. I like to text random things. I've tried to get better about not doing it as much, or at least padding it with a little bit of buffer time in between messages. But there we go. I think the biggest lesson that I took away from that is that there really is no barrier to reconnection. There's really these mental blocks, I think, that we put in our head about connecting with people and reaching out and reconnecting, all of those social things. And they're in your head. I had been kind of struggling a little bit with my departure for years from Rubrik. I tried to do a good job at leaving a place because I don't ever think it's permanent. And I wrote about what it was like to leave SCaLE. It's on my blog, thanks to a question from Nick. I don't think I did the best job at Rubrik. It was also the pandemic, and so I was not in a great place. And I think the closure of getting to go back and tell people, hey, I don't think I left in the best way. I think I should have talked to more of you and had a conversation and just trusted more in our relationship would have been the better move. And then telling them that and being able to express things that I used to have real struggles expressing was freeing. And telling people, I miss you. I miss talking to you. I miss working with you. I miss being around you. It's good to see you again. It's good to be around you. It's just a new thing for me. Giving hugs is a new thing for me. I've just been very introverted and avoiding human contact for a lot of my life. And I just think that's part of who I am and how I act. But then I finally challenged it years ago. And it's great to be able to go be around people as this new version of myself, to contrast against my memory of myself. It's a great yardstick to measure growth and progress. So I guess for any other reason, or maybe just that one reason, it's worth to reconnect with folks just to see, how am I different? And then to build upon that, how are they different? I don't know. Take that for what it's worth, but don't let too much time pass before you reconnect and see people that you love and care about. I think that's the ultimate takeaway there. Let's see, SCaLE, yes. So taking you back just a bit, I work with this group of amazing people. That's kind of this advisory group based on different specialists and experts in their fields. And we all come together and we advise people that need advising. Given that I wasn't going to be working at SCaLE anymore, I wasn't going to be at events that much anymore. I'm already not at events that often. At Rubrik, I was at a lot of events, and then at SCaLE, not many. And then now, basically none. Conferences and things like that. And so I asked the team, like, hey, you have this large sheet of events that you and your team go to for all this advisory stuff. What one event would you go to? SCaLE came up. Everybody was like, yeah, SCaLE, it's awesome. You need to go to SCaLE. I had not really heard of SCaLE before. I knew it existed, but I'd never dug into it. And I took their word for it. All right, I'll go. Thursday, a couple weeks ago, I went and packed up from the Bay Area, landed in LA, took the arduous Uber all the way to Pasadena to attend SCaLE 22nd year. The first impressions of SCaLE, I guess the most important one is that I think I'm going to keep going to SCaLE. There's been a few conferences that I really, really enjoyed. Delivery Conf back in 2020 was one of them. SCaLE now is another one. I think those are the two that kind of stand out as ones that I really, really liked. So this is number 2 of ones that I've attended in my life. And I think the biggest reason was the environment of the people that were there. Very family friendly. Lots of kids, babies, young kids, teens, young adults through my age, through much older than me. Very diverse age group. There was even a SCaLE like next generation sort of mini event going on for kids and young adults to deliver talks to other kids and young adults. Wow, that's mind-blowing. I was very supportive of it. I very much liked it. I certainly tried to be an adult who knew that he was around kids for the 4 days that I was there. So I just like that. It's good culture. The other thing is that there was like 7 events going on at the same time. There was a DevOps Days LA. There was an event for open infrastructure. There was an event for security. There was a lot of different events kind of all under the umbrella of the SCaLE event. I thought that was super cool too, because I went to different tracks in these other events. They were available in the agenda. Wow, right? Just fascinating how that symbiotic relationship between these groups. I liked it. And Kelsey Hightower was there. Who doesn't want to hear Kelsey Hightower give a talk or answer questions on a panel? And I saw him in both. I saw him in a 1-hour Q&A fireside chat with another individual. And then the next day I saw him in a panel of folks talking about the chaos of software development. So I think if I were to distill all of these things for a moment into like what was the big takeaway from the conference, it was obviously a lot of AI, but more from the perspective of, hey man, I'm like a systems person or a platform person or an infrastructure person in the various myriad of ways that I am. Yeah, there were developers and security people and other folks there, but there was a lot of systems engineers and people like me there that are less interested in building the software and more interested in building what the software sits upon and helping developers make the software. That is my passion. That is where I sit in the spectrum of technologists. And so I saw a lot of folks there that were wondering everything from how do I keep the humanity in my job, given that all my metrics keep me away from talking to users and keeping the user kind of away from me, which feels odd. I see all this AI. What's it going to do to my job? What's it going to do to my career? What's it doing to my managers and my management layers? And I think Kelsey, going back to talking about him having these Q&A sessions and panel sessions, was the biggest proponent for humanity at the event. Because he was always like, hey, you're a human, be one. You know, what makes you human? What gives you the context to make the decisions that you can make? And the reality of like, hey man, if your job is just being a computer, you're just taking data from one system and then scooting that into another system and puking out spreadsheets from it. Yeah, you probably should be worried about AI. That human computer interface is likely going to evaporate. So it was good. Kelsey's a great guy. And now he's like retired and advising people and learning plumbing and home improvement, things like that, which resonates in my soul. This last week, I've been spending a lot of time in my garden because it's spring. And that's why this podcast is kind of so late, is because it's spring. I need to plant. I have a lot of gardening to do because I would like to reduce my reliance on buying store-bought vegetables and going to the farmer's market. I'd like to be able to grow and produce and be self-sufficient for a lot of the things that I do. But that's an aside. Long story short, I would go to SCaLE. I think it's awesome. Pasadena is beautiful, but the event changed me. I went to the event feeling very like a sense of urgency, a sense of like, I need to go make things. I need to build. I need to create content for this podcast and my YouTube and kind of. And I came back and I spent a whole week working in the garden and on my shed and enjoying a little time off, that feeling of just raw urgency, I think was a holdover from more of my corporate life, more of the past. I feel a lot more peace. I've redoubled my efforts in physical wellness. And so I'm not as worried about the work side of things, the creation side of things as I was. I'm trying to pull a little bit of the energy out of that I was to frantically create, and put a little bit of that into my garden time, my wellness time, taking my shoes off and walking on the grass and just thinking through things and listening to podcasts and reading books and just kind of enjoying a little bit of life until that gets boring. And then I re-energize and am invigorated to create content. But I want to leave you with just those few things. I also want to say a little pouring of liquor out for Skype. Goodbye, Skype. You were a friend and an enemy at the same time. It was the first place I ever recorded a podcast was on Skype. So I felt it a tribute to say goodbye to Skype on this podcast. At any rate, I hope you've enjoyed this episode of Thoughtfully Critical. Let's talk again soon. Peace and love.